The full lifting of Spanish restrictions on Gibraltar in 5 days' time marks the end of the latest blockade on the rock and the start of a new phase in Spain's claim for the recovery of sovereignty over the rock. The period which ends with the start of talks, which will include sovereignty, dates from 1963-64, when Spain first raised the subject at the United Nations. 2 delegates from Gibraltar, Sir Joshua Hassan and Mr. Peter Isola, travelled to the United Nations to address the Committee on Colonialism. They opposed Spanish demands and backed Britain's suggestion that it was up to the people of Gibraltar to decide for themselves between British and Spanish rule. Spain strongly opposed that idea. There were scenes of tumult when Sir Joshua and Mr. Isola returned to Gibraltar. Crowds lined the route, waving banners and cheering as the 2 men drove by. At John Mackintosh Square, the crowd was addressed by both leaders. That same month, October, Spain started tightening its customs regime at the frontier. The restrictions worsened. In February 1965, Spanish frontier police started stopping Spaniards working in Gibraltar and barring many of them from entry. About 10,000 Spaniards used to make the daily crossing, providing about 2/3 of the rock's workforce. At around the same time, more than 400 women left Spain to live permanently in Gibraltar. They were married to Gibraltarians and previously lived with their husbands and children in Spain because of the shortage of accommodation here. Their husbands worked in Gibraltar, and fearing that Spain would not allow them to return to their homes after work, the women brought their families to the rock. The then governor, Sir Dudley Ward, visited the refugees. The British government took up the problem of restrictions on travel across the frontier with the Spanish government and said it was watching the situation closely. It also said it was awaiting a report from its own economic expert before deciding on any measures to maintain the rock's economy. Tourists returning home from Gibraltar were also being affected by the restrictions at the frontier. Hundreds of vehicles piled up at the border as the Spanish guards restricted the number through the gates to 1 in every 20 minutes. The hold-up caused considerable frustration, and drivers were given queue tickets to help ease the flow of traffic. Servicemen and their families stationed in the border area helped the stranded tourists with food and drink, as well as bedding. Many people on camping holidays pitched roadside tents when the border gates closed for the night. The Spanish authorities then imposed restrictions on airspace on the approaches to the Gibraltar airstrip. Royal Air Force hunters would be used as escorts to civil airliners if they were hassled by the Spanish Air Force. A British European Airways Comet was the first plane to land since the air ban. Good weather conditions enabled the pilot to avoid the prohibited zone. However, pilots were told that the safety of their passengers must be the primary consideration. Two Spanish Air Force Super Sabres flew past the airstrip just as the Comet landed. Early in May 1968, Spain closed the frontier to all but Spanish workers. That night, the last few Britons came across to Gibraltar just before the gates were locked. Spain said it was closing the frontier because Britain had declared it had no intention of heeding the United Nations General Assembly vote backing Spanish claims for the return of the rock. Spanish workers said farewell, some of them tearfully, as they crossed into La Linea for the last time on the 8th of June 1969. The closure of the frontier was ordered by General Franco in retaliation for Britain's publication of Gibraltar's new constitution. At 11:30 at night, Spanish guards closed the frontier gates and the final land link between Spain and the Rock was broken. The crowd of about 600 Gibraltarians, foiled in their attempts to place a Union Jack on the closed gates, sang the national anthem. "18 days later, the Algeciras ferry arrived on her last trip across the bay. On her return trip, the Punta de Europa carried 58 passengers. Some were foreign tourists. In July 1972, Spanish Foreign Minister López Bravo began a 3-day official visit to London for talks on the Gibraltar dispute with Sir Alec Douglas-Home, British Foreign Secretary. The two ministers had previously held exploratory talks. The death of General Franco in November 1975 aroused hopes in Gibraltar of a restoration of normal relations. 2 years later, for the first time, Gibraltar's leaders formed part of the British delegation at Anglo-Spanish talks held at ministerial level. Meetings were held in Strasbourg and then in Paris. Sir Joshua Hassan and Mr. Maurice Chiveras joined Foreign Secretary Dr. David Owen, while Senor Marcelino Oreja, then Foreign Minister, headed the Spanish team. Working parties of officials were set up to discuss telecommunications, maritime communications, and social security for Spaniards previously employed in Gibraltar. But it all came to nothing. There appeared to be a breakthrough in 1980, when on the 10th of April, the Foreign Secretary, Lord Carrington, and his Spanish counterpart, Marcelino Oreja, signed the Lisbon Agreement. They agreed to resolve the Gibraltar problem and start negotiations. Spain agreed to suspend its restrictions. All practical steps would be completed by the 1st of June. Work started on both sides of the frontier, but the date came and nothing happened. Later, the Foreign Office confirmed that there had been a delay in the opening of the frontier. Spain said it would not open the frontier until all pending problems were resolved. In December the following year, preparations restarted on the Spanish side of the frontier at a very fast pace. Customs buildings, police posts, and vehicle holding areas were built. Work was also in full swing on this side. The provision of car parks was given priority. No date had been announced for the opening of the frontier, but it was expected during the Spanish Prime Minister's visit to London in the new year. The British and Spanish Prime Ministers decided to implement the Lisbon Agreement on the 20th of April 1982. Preparations were stepped up, and the frontier area became the favourite picnic site.
Because we want the frontier to open, we are very happy.
I think it will be for the best.
On the frontier to open.
However, on the 8th of April, everything came to a halt. Because of the Falklands War, Spain postponed the opening of the frontier.
It has been agreed between the British and Spanish governments that the arrangements for negotiations to start between the two sides about Gibraltar on the 20th of April, at the same time as the re-establishment of direct communications, should be postponed.
That year, the opening was postponed for a second time, in June, because the weak government in Spain felt Britain was in no mood to discuss Gibraltar's sovereignty after defeating the Argentine forces in the Falklands.
The postponement has been indefinite. Certainly they will have to open it before Spain joins the EEC, and I hope that Britain will bring enough pressure within NATO now, before they go into the details of the command structure and so on, in order to make her open the frontier, because it is inconceivable that it should remain closed while she is going to be an active member of NATO.
Spain, however, started opening the frontier daily to allow families on either side to visit relatives. The Spanish authorities said this arrangement was purely for humanitarian reasons. The year saw a change of government in Spain, and the new socialist administration decided to open the frontier for pedestrians holding Spanish passports or British passports of residents of Gibraltar. This was the scene on the night of the 14th of December.
And coming up now, yes, on your screen now, they're opening the gates for people to travel from Spain into Gibraltar. There is the man who holds the key. ¿Dónde está la llave? That is the gentleman who has it. The gate is now open and will remain open now for a long time, hopefully, so that families on both sides of the frontier can communicate with each other. That is the gentleman who is responsible for the opening. Very punctually, at 12 midnight, passage into Spain was open, and it's taken a minute to come just across the frontier to open passage into Gibraltar.
The restriction on the categories of people who could cross the frontier was introduced, according to Spain, so as not to allow Gibraltar to adversely affect the Spanish economy by flooding Spain with tourists from the Rocks airport. The discriminatory opening of the frontier adversely affected Gibraltar's economy. Sales of fruit and vegetables here dropped by some 30%. The bread industry also reported a drop of between 5 and 15%. Local traders also complained that the strength of the pound against the peseta didn't help Gibraltar to be competitive. Yet, Gibraltar residents visited Spain regularly. They holidayed at regular intervals for extended periods. This was also said to be a considerable drain on the Rocks economy. During last year, British Foreign Secretary Sir Geoffrey Howe and the Spanish Foreign Minister, Senor Fernando Moran, held a number of meetings aimed at resolving their differences on Gibraltar. Technical talks were also held between British and Spanish officials. The Chief Minister, Sir Joshua Hassan, also travelled to London a number of times during the year for consultations. The result of all these meetings was the Brussels Agreement of the 27th of November.
I am satisfied. I have welcomed the agreement publicly, and my colleagues have. They have supported me throughout this long period of negotiation, which has been for over a year. This is the result of this very long process. And I think it is good for Gibraltar, and I think it will be a first step to a process of normalization of the district, of the areas, Gibraltar and its campo, and that it will be for the benefit of all. Certainly, by the way in which the people of Gibraltar took advantage of the pedestrian opening by going to Spain, there is certainly no reluctance on the part of the people of Gibraltar to cooperate in that way, so we would hope the same readiness exists on the part of other people in Spain to come to Gibraltar.
When the agreement is implemented and the economic effects start taking place, Gibraltar will suffer dramatically in economic terms as a result of this agreement. It isn't totally negative for a very simple reason, that consumers will be able to spend even more money in Spain than they're spending today, and therefore they will benefit by buying stuff cheaper. But the economic impact on Gibraltar will be that much more serious as a result. Now, we are not bound by this agreement. We repudiate it, and we will vote against anything we see against Gibraltar's interests.
A date has again been set for the opening of the frontier and the start of negotiations on Gibraltar. Final preparations are being carried out, and everything now seems set for the implementation of the agreement on the 5th of next month.